Hello, this is week 3 enrichment for Algebra 1. I'm going to touch more on factoring and solving. Now we're going to jump into solving. So for quadratics, for any equation, you could solve for x or solve for the variable, and I'm going to show you how to factor and then solve from your factors. So week 3 enrichment's all optional. Okay, so now this quadratic looks a little different than last week. We have a y equals, and since you have an equal sign, it's an equation. And when we have an equation, we could solve. Without the equation, it's called an expression. So if I just had x squared plus 8x plus 15, it's called an expression. So you still approach it the same way. You have a is with the x squared. So a is here, and there's only one x squared, so a is 1. B is 8 with the x, and C is 15. Now when we're solving for x. Oops. Okay, so here we have this quadratic. A is 1. So since A is 1, I could jump into the x factor and put 15 here and 8 here. 15 times 1 is 15. Now what two numbers multiply to 15 and add to 8? 5 and 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. 5 times 3 is 15. So since A is 1, I could jump into y plus 5. I'm sorry, x plus 5, x plus 3, not y. I was thinking of this, equals y. I'm going to keep it as an equation. So I just took this part, this expression, and factored it. These two are the same. Now to solve for x, I need to substitute, instead of y, I need to substitute 0. And we do that because what this is doing is finding the x-intercepts of our graph. And on the x-axis, y values are 0. So if I have a point right here, sorry, I'm not changing colors because it takes me a minute. Oh, I guess I should, you can start to see. So if I have this point right here, whatever number that is, your y value is 0 because this is your y. And it's on the 0 mark. Up here is positive, down here is negative. So I want this factor, these factors to equal 0. You could put equals 0 here, but you can't really tell what the answer is with that x squared. Here, it's called the zero product property. Oops. And what that means, zero product. Product is multiplication, an answer to multiplication. And what that means is if I have a number, and I shouldn't use my letters I've used up there. I'm going to call the number D, and I'm going to multiply D by 0. No matter what my answer is, my number is for D, I'm going to get 0. If I have 1 million and I multiply by 0, my answer is going to be 0. If I have 5 and I multiply by 0, my answer is going to be 0. And since it's multiplication, you could have 0 first or you could have 0 second. Multiplication is the same, and I'm sorry, I can't think of the property right off the top of my head right now. But 3 times 2 and 2 times 3, you get the same answer. So, zero product property. So what that is saying is that if this parenthesis, if this factor was 0, 0 times x plus 3 would get me 0. Or if this factor was 0, x plus 5 times 0 is going to give me 0. So I'm going to scroll down to just show that. So if I have x plus 5, and I multiply that by 0, say x plus 3 is 0, if I distribute that, I get 0 times x and 0 times 5, I'm going to get 0. And the same thing if x plus 3 was 0. So in order to solve these, we have to, I'm going to switch to black because my green works more of an explanation. I have to set each parenthesis, each factor equal to 0. So I have x plus 5 equals 0, because that's one thing I could have as 0. And the other thing is x plus 3 equals 0. Now you may be able to tell right away that what plus 5 is 0? Negative 5 plus 5 is 0, and negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So here, it really is just the opposite of the number in the parentheses. So for your worksheet, this is exactly what I want you to do. I want you to factor it. I'm going to use a purple underline. I want you to be able to factor it. And then I want you to solve it. And solve it means give me an x equal to. So let's do 3 more. They're just different things that you have to look for. Here we have a is negative 1. B is negative 2. But there is no number without an x, so C is 0. But before I start getting into factoring it, whenever you have a as negative 1, you could always factor out a negative. So I'm going to factor out that negative, and I'm going to say negative 1 and then parentheses. Now if I take out the negative 1 there, I'm going to have x squared. And if I take out a negative 1 there, I'm going to have 2, because 2 times negative 1 is 2, negative 2. So I get this now. So now I want to redo my ABC based on this part right here. This is the part we're going to factor. A is now 1. Now, 2 ways you could factor it. One way is look for a GCF, and there's also another GCF there. Since C is 0, you could also say negative 1x is taken out, and you have an x left and a 2. So that's one way to do it. I think that's the easiest way. Another way you do it, you could do C is 0, and B over here, B is 2. So 1 multiplies to 2, multiplies to 0 and adds to 2, 2 and 0, right? So you could do it that way and put your bubbles right off the bat for this part. But I like looking for the GCF, and since there's no C, there's no extra value with an x, so the thing common is negative 1x. So I like jumping from there, oops, to right here. That's an arrow, looks like an eye. Okay, so right here, now my zero product property, I set this equal to 0. And I'm going to take off the 1 because negative x is the same as negative 1x. These two factors. Now with these two factors, this can be 0 or this factor can be 0. So negative x equals 0. Well, 0 doesn't really have a negative when you divide by negative 1. So x equals 0. Whenever you have an x on the outside of the parentheses, one of your answers is going to be 0. And the other one is x plus 2 equals 0. So what cancels with positive 2? Or you could subtract 2 from both sides, negative 2. Okay? So there's 2 more I want to show you because they're like the ones on the worksheet. So here, this is one that we do have an A, B, and C. But before starting, like I said, if you find a negative A, I would take out a negative 1. You could write 1 or not, it's up to you. Negative 1. So I have an x squared. If I take out a negative, this is going to be a positive 6x. Take out a negative, this is a positive 8. Now, my A is 1. B is 6. Sorry, I try to make my 6 a little curvier. And C is 8. So now, I have 8 and I have 6. So it's nice because now I change it that these are positive. So what multiplies to 6 and adds to 8? Oh, wrong. What multiplies to 8 and adds to 6? 4 plus 2, right? So I'm going to get, don't forget about that negative. We have to do x plus 4. Because now our a is positive 1, so we don't have to do the long train thing that I take 3 car and make into 4 car and then do grouping. Since a is 1, I could just factor it. But you got to remember this negative 1 stays outside. You have to have this negative 1 out here, or else it's not the same answer. So now, I don't know if you're ready, but looking at this, you know in your head, what would cancel out with a 4 to make this first factor 0? What would cancel out with that 4 is a negative 4. And what would cancel out with this 2 would be the opposite of this, a negative 2. So right here, I have my factors and my answers all in one. Okay? If you don't need to set it equal to 0, it is fine. You could just look for the opposite. Sometimes it gets complicated and you have to set it equal to 0, especially when you have like 2x plus 7 or something like that. Okay. Step 1 is look for a GCF. And if it's a negative for A, the negative at least is going to be GCF. This one is a negative 2 for A, and actually 2 goes into 12 and 16 also. So negative 2 is your GCF. So step 1 of factoring, look for a GCF. Negative 12 divided by negative 2 is 6. Negative 16 divided by negative 2 is 8. So look, it's exactly what I have above. So what's going to be different with this one, now we just factored it and we know these are the factors, x plus 4 and x plus 2, is that instead of a negative 1 outside, you have to write this negative 2. So as you see, these are two different problems, but they have the same factors when I take out the GCF. So now I have this. Now, just like the last one, here are my factors. I know if I say x plus 4 equals 0, I know x is negative 4, and x plus 2 equals 0. This is something I did not do in the last one. I just did the opposites, which is fine, as long as that factor equals 0, that bubble, that parentheses. So I get the same answers for x as I do in the last one, but what's different is the factor. The factor is this. That's telling me these two graphs, when they're graphed, have the same x-intercepts, but they may be, a parabolas can be wider, more narrow, so that's what's going to be different about those. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Week 3, we're halfway through. Bye-bye.